Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Val and welcome to day 14 of our 200 days of Psalms. And today's psalm is actually Psalms chapter 14, where we see David analyzing the condition of the man who rejects God, and on the other hand he talks about the safety of the righteous. And so let's get into it. In verse 1 he begins by saying that the fool has said in his heart, there is no God, they are also corrupt, and they believe that there is no one who does any good. And here David is trying to tell us that for us to sit here and start rejecting God or denying his existence is actually being a fool and intellectual. And it should be in somewhere in Job, when Job was questioning God about when he was going through his turmoil of suffering. And I believe God asked him, were you there when I created the oceans, the bird and the seas? I do believe that even the creation that God has created, this would be as simple as just what we see on earth. It just testifies about the goodness of God, and even just how even God has created human beings, it just testifies about who he is. I don't think it's a good thing to sit there and start questioning about his existence. And David continues to say that God is actually seated in heaven looking at the children of men, which are also his children, to see if there's anyone who understands to seek him. I do believe with God it takes understanding to understand, even like as simple as how he created us. To understand the things of God, it takes understanding. Even the way, even in Proverbs it talks about my people perish because of lack of understanding. We need to understand God, and it's so easy sometimes to even misunderstand God because we don't understand him, we don't know him for ourselves, we don't know certain dimensions of him. And in verse 3 David continues to tell us that God is still looking to see if we understand to seek him, but when he looks he finds that we have turned against him. He finds that we are corrupt, and he continues, and David now is telling us that there is no one who does good. And this is just an indication that men have fallen. I do believe that we really do fall short of the grace of God. As much as sometimes we may see ourselves as righteous, we fall out of grace a lot. And I do believe grace is all that we need. His grace is sufficient. And as much as God is trying to look and see if we are still faithful to seek him, I do believe he understands us, and that's why we really need to cry for his mercies each day, because sometimes we don't know which side of mercy we need, where we need the mercies of God and where we actually need the mercies of God. And in verse 4 David continues to say that all the workers of iniquity, all those who have no knowledge of God, all those who keep discouraging the righteous, that they're actually in fear, because now God is actually fixing his eyes on the righteous. I do believe that fear is a result of not being right with God, because here when David talks about that the righteous, the eyes of God are fixed on the righteous, it means that the righteous also fix their eyes on God because they know who they have trusted. And in this case, because the righteous know they are God, they don't have fear. But because the unjust or the men who have fallen, they really don't know God, that's why they tend to have fear, because they're actually not even right with God. And in verse 6 David continues to tell us that the men of iniquities, these are the men who are unjust, the men who are wicked, that they tend to shame the counsel of the poor, but the Lord is the refuge of these poor people, the poor people who are just being put into shame by the men who have actually fallen. One thing I know for sure is that God is never unjust. I do believe that he cannot sit there and look at his people being oppressed, as he has said that he's a refuge to the poor. I do believe that we need to get to learn to surrender our battles to God. We need to get to that point where we don't fight our battles, we really just surrender it to God and allow God to fight it. And it's actually in somewhere in Chronicles, it should be 2020 somewhere there, when it talks about the battle is not yours. You really need to learn how to surrender your battle to God, no matter what it is, no matter what kind of pressure it is, no matter how hard it is. God, sometimes when you allow God to fight your battles, they become easier. When you stop focusing on these things that are actually mountains to you, you fix your eyes on Jesus, these things don't become big as much as we sometimes magnify them because of our emotions, because of just of our human nature. But when you involve the aspect of God, things becomes easy. It talks about even how the mountains melt in his presence. So we really need to get to his presence and surrender all our mountains, and to even surrender our battles. In this case, the battle was actually between the wicked and the righteous, and it was more of the fallen man was not more with God, but God was always a refuge to the poor man, the man who was kind of righteous with God, actually righteous with God, compared to this other man who was actually fallen and walking in wickedness and sin. And David just concludes by saying, oh, that the salvation of Israel will come out of Zion. Zion is actually the city of God. Zion is the house of God. And he talks about when this captivity of Jacob's and Israel came to an end, they rejoiced and they were glad. And really, this is just David trying to tell us that the Lord is a refuge to his people, and the wicked can never run They can never run the show. The wicked can never run the show. And also David just desires that the victory that God had actually promised his people would come to pass. And he urges us that when the victory comes, we ought to praise and rejoice in God, because we find victory in him, we find our salvation in him. And yeah, that's all I had for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow, and bye.